Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going deep on a man whose name, well, it probably won't ring a bell for most people. But his impact is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, just foundational to modern American life.
That's right.
I mean, when you drive on a highway or cross a huge bridge or even just, drink tap water that isn't full of industrial waste, you're interacting with the legacy of this one person.
And that person is John Anton Blatnik. Born in 1911, passed away in 1991. Blatnik was really the definition of a legislative powerhouse, but he got there through sheer longevity.
Longevity is the key word. He served 14 consecutive terms in the U.S. House.
14 from 1947 all the way through 1974.
Well, that's a masterclass in just sticking around long enough to get real procedural power. He represented Minnesota's 8th District running on the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party ticket, the DFL.
So for you listening, the mission of this deep dive is to kind of connect the dots on a man who had what seems like 3 totally different careers. He goes from being a high school chemistry teacher to a World War II intelligence operative, and then becomes this ultimate infrastructure guy who, paradoxically, also writes one of the nation's most important environmental laws.
A quiet giant, operating inside the machinery of Congress.
Exactly.
So let's unpack that arc, because it starts, very far from the halls of power. Blatnik was born in Chisholm, Minnesota, the son of Slovene immigrants. He gets his degree from Winona State Teachers College, and, just like you said, starts his career as a chemistry teacher in his hometown.
And it's interesting, that background in chemistry, that kind of training is all about precision, right? Understanding systems, breaking complex things down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that system-focused mind pretty quickly found an outlet in politics. He served in the Minnesota State Senate first, from 1940 to 1944, gaining that critical state experience.
But then World War II just changes everything. In 1942, while he's still a state senator, Blatnik volunteers for the United States Army Air Corps. And you wouldn't expect the next stop to be a covert mission in the Balkans.
And this is the pivot point. This is the part of his life that explains so much about how effective he becomes later. He was deployed with the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS.
The OSS, so the forerunner to the CIA.
Precisely. For almost a year, Blatnik was the chief of the OSS mission with Josip Broz Tito's Yugoslav partisans.
Okay, we have to pause on that for a second. The complexity of that role is just staggering. Tito's leading a resistance in this incredibly fragmented, war-torn region.
Oh, yeah?
You have massive geopolitical forces at play, internal communist factions. This was not a standard military posting.
Far from it. This was pure high-stakes logistics and diplomacy, all under fire. Blatnik's job was basically managing a really complex supply chain, coordinating intelligence, and keeping communication lines open between all these different, often suspicious fighting groups.
So you had to get weapons, food, medical supplies.
Exactly. To all these isolated teams. He had to understand the politics, the terrain, everything. He was managing human and logistical systems in a hostile environment.
So that's the through line.
Yeah.
From analyzing chemical systems to managing these incredibly complex human systems. What specific skills from the OSS did he then bring to Congress?
The ability to manage huge budgets and coordinate massive multi-agency projects. The source material really suggests that the skills he learned in Yugoslavia, accountability, knowing where supplies need to go, ensuring compliance over huge areas, are exactly the skills you need to oversee billions in federal spending on highways and waterways.
He learned how to manage risk when failure literally wasn't an option.
Yes, and he brought that skill set back home and was elected to the House in '46. And for the next 3 decades, he just built up his power base, getting reelected again and again.
So that longevity pays off.
It pays off in a huge way. It allowed him to get the ball rolling on projects that really reshaped the economic geography of the entire country. He was an early, pivotal supporter of the St. Lawrence Seaway.
And he didn't just vote for it, right? He was involved from the beginning.
He helped develop the original legislation to build that monumental shipping route.
The Seaway is such a great example of a legacy project. It feels almost mythological in scope. For you listening, the key here is the scale. This was an enormous joint U.S.-Canadian project. It essentially turned the Great Lakes into an oceanic fourth coast. It transformed the Midwest by letting these huge, deep draft ships get all the way to the Atlantic.
Absolutely. And Blatnik had to navigate massive funding hurdles, international treaties. His work basically plugged the economic engine of the Midwest directly into global markets, and that was just one of his early hits.
So beyond the concrete and the water, he was also involved in the major moral questions of the time.
Yes. He showed a clear commitment to national social policy. He voted for the critical Civil Rights Act of 1964, which shows he could balance those huge local infrastructure needs with the, foundational ethical demands of the nation.
Okay, now let's talk about the hyper-local side of his job. This is probably the most surprising detail in the file. His district, the 8th, had a really strong Scandinavian heritage.
It did, and he championed a cultural touchstone for them. In 1963, Blatnik introduced the bill to make Leif Erikson Day a nationwide observance.
And it passed.
Passed unanimously the next year in 1964.
That's a wonderful contrast, isn't it? The same guy who's helping unlock the global economy with the Seaway is also making sure we celebrate a local cultural hero.
That's exactly why he got reelected 13 times. He had the huge national vision, but he never lost touch with the cultural identity of the people who sent him to Washington.
Okay, let's shift to the absolute peak of his power. He spends nearly 25 years just setting the stage for this, but his final 2 terms, that's when he gets the position that lets him etch his name into U.S. law permanently.
The turning point is 1971. For his last 2 terms, 71 to 74, he becomes chairman of the Public Works Committee. For anyone who follows politics, that is. That's like holding the keys to the entire nation's physical plant.
Right, that committee, we now call it the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. It's not just about roads. It controls funding for federal buildings, disaster response, and most importantly, for Blatnik, all navigable waters and flood control.
Exactly. And this is where that paradox of his career really comes into focus. He was the head of the building committee, the Let's Pour Concrete Committee. And yet he used that authority not just to build, but to clean up. It was from this powerful infrastructure platform that Blatnik successfully shepherded the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to passage in 1972.
And that, of course, is the law we all know today as the Clean Water Act.
The foundational law. It established the basic structure for regulating pollutants being discharged into the waters of the United States. And if you think about American rivers in the late 60s, the Cuyahoga River famously catching on fire, the need was urgent.
The mechanism of his success here is fascinating, though. He didn't use an environmental committee. He used the Public Works Committee. How did that work? How did his control over infrastructure give him the leverage to pass a massive environmental law?
He connected the dots between spending and compliance. It was a masterstroke. He used the immense power of his committee to make federal infrastructure funding contingent on local compliance with water quality standards.
So if you want money for a highway.
Exactly. If a state wanted highway money or bridge funding or help with wastewater treatment plants, all things his committee controlled, they had to follow the new federal standards he was setting. He leveraged the political weight of construction to mandate environmental cleanup.
Wow. So a former chemistry teacher used his understanding of systems and his OSS logistics expertise to basically restructure the entire regulatory environment.
He did. It really shows how legislative influence actually works. He didn't lead some big grassroots movement. He controlled the flow of money. He used the committee structure as his primary weapon.
And his congressional run finally came to an end on December 31st, 1974.
And the succession was just as smooth as everything else he did. When he retired, Blatnik endorsed his longtime administrative assistant, a guy named Jim Oberstar, to replace him.
And Oberstar won.
Won easily in 74. And he continued Blatnik's legacy, focusing on transportation and infrastructure for decades. It was a seamless handoff.
The opposite of a political vacuum. It was design continuity. But beyond the political machine, his legacy is when you can literally drive across it.
That's right. Blatnik's name is etched into the landscape of his home state. The huge bridge for Interstate 535 crossing between Wisconsin and Minnesota was renamed the John A. Blatnik Bridge in his honor in 1971, while he was still serving as chairman. It's this physical, concrete reminder of the man who controlled America's building portfolio.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We started out by saying Blatnik is this unsung name, but his fingerprints are everywhere. His career connects the WWII spy mission, the St. Lawrence Seaway, establishing Leif Erikson Day, and most importantly, giving us the Clean Water Act.
And his life really demonstrates that profound influence isn't tied to celebrity or fame. He understood that committee work, coordination, mastering procedure, those were the keys to actual lasting change. He wasn't aiming for the front page. He was aiming for the statute books.
The structural integrity of the nation. It's incredible.
His achievements range from a national holiday to commanding a spy mission to passing the single most important piece of water quality legislation in U.S. history. which really makes you wonder.
What other essential pieces of modern American life, from our intricate network of interstate bridges to the very framework of our environmental policies, were fundamentally shaped by figures just like John Blatnik,
Right.
the ones who spent decades quietly managing the machinery of Congress instead of seeking the national spotlight? Every time you cross an interstate bridge today, you're interacting with funding and safety mechanisms put in place by a handful of people just like him. Who is that invisible committee chair quietly setting the stage for the next 50 years of our digital or our energy infrastructure? That's the question to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us into the incredible hidden career of John Blatnik. We'll see you next time.